Everybody, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Frame. Now, if you've seen in the past some of these videos, we go through some of the images that we've taken out in the field and take you through the processing thereof. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. Okay, so as I mentioned, behind the frame, like you've seen in previous videos, we normally go through images that we've taken out in the field and show you how we would edit those particular images. But in this case, I'm going to do a little bit of a different spin on in this particular episode and talk about the subject called on the kill. Now, let's be honest, a lot of people on safari would like to see a kill when they go out there, but in all honesty, once you sort of presented with a kill, especially once the kill has happened, there's not really much from a photographic point of view, not that you're going to use anyway. I mean, you're not going to be printing a photo of like blood and gore on your wall or something like that. So I'm going to take you through a few steps. First of all, the approach or the moment before the chase actually happens, then the actual chase, the takedown, a little bit of interaction, and then also possibly scenes after the kill. So let's get straight into it and have a look at some images. Okay, so as you can see, I've kind of sort of highlighted, made a collection of some of the images that I think kind of works from a kill point of view. And like I mentioned, once a kill happens and the animals start feeding, then there really isn't much photographically that you're going to be using. So let's talk about kind of the approach or the kind of stalking that happens. Now, if you look at the first image here of an African wild dog, you can clearly see, just from the sort of the body position, the ears being up, this animal, they ready to go on the hunt. And I think, this kind of happens or helps when you have a good, either good local guide or good photographic guide to have your settings ready, before the moment actually happens. Because, I mean, we all know once the situation happens, it's over pretty quickly. So if we have a look at the settings here, just for reference, 4,000th of a second. So a nice fast shutter speed. So that means, if this animal starts running, you're going to be freezing that particular movement. So I think that's something it's very important, having a fast shutter speed. And then in this particular case, a shallow depth of field. Maybe, once a kill happens, probably you kind of want a little bit more depth of field if the light allows. And then ISO obviously just kind of sort of blends into or assists to whatever settings you need from a shutter speed and aperture point of view. So that's the kind of the initial sort of moment before the action happens. I'm trying to see if I've got another one here. Here's another situation here. So you can see this is kind of the moment this wildebeest got separated from the herd. This lion was obviously kind of very interested, and there were actually a few others approaching. So getting your settings ready here before the action happens, because once this lioness decides to go for it, you're not going to have time to then kind of change your shutter speed or aperture or anything like that. As you can see, just from these settings here, ISO getting quite high at 3200, shutter speed at 640. Ideally I would have liked a little bit more, but because the light was so low and it was quite a rainy afternoon, that's kind of what I had to work with. For this particular scenario, that shutter speed is fine, but I think once the action happened, I actually missed the takedown on this particular moment. I was videoing it, so I didn't take any still images. But with that takedown, then you might find some parts would be blurred. So critical that you kind of prepare yourself from a settings point of view. Then let's have a look at the chase. Now this, for me, I think this is probably the part that I think the story, from a storytelling point of view, is the most striking. So we have a look at this image here. So this was in the Serengeti, a great place where you can actually set yourself up to photograph hunts, because it's wide open spaces. You don't have a lot of vegetation in the way, And often what happens is these cheetahs often hunt middle of the day, late morning or middle of the day. So you've got a lot of light available. And like I mentioned, it's nice and open. So you can get yourself ready and make sure you have a fast shutter speed and be ready to capture the moment. One thing that I would advise, if I just show you, so you can see this is cropped in quite a bit. So what I would always advise, when you're photographing hunts, especially the chase and especially with a fast subject like a cheetah, is to rather zoom out. Zoom out, it just because it happens so quickly. If you're zooming in, there's a good chance you're going to crop off a tail or chop off the leg of the animal, and then you can't do anything with it. So rather zoom out, capture that scene that's in front of you, and then you can crop in afterwards. Okay, so if we have a look at just at the settings, so you can see a shutter speed 6400. It's a nice fast shutter speed. A shallow depth of field, again, I probably could have gone maybe 7.1 or even f8. And ISO also nice and low. Because this scene happened sort of late morning, perfect time to photograph that. Here's another one as it was getting a little bit closer. So settings are the same, 6400, f4, 400, 400 ISO. And again, if I show you what, so this scene, I was probably lucky to get away with it. This was at full frame. So ideally, try and zoom out a little bit. I was shooting with a fixed 400 no, actually I was shooting with a 600 mm lens, sorry. So, nice and close. It is a risk, but, I would rather sort of play it safe and go maybe, if you can zoom out a little bit, then rather do so. Let's see, another let's see if I've got another chase anywhere here. What is this one? No, that. Okay, so that's probably it from a chase point of view. Then another moment, if you're lucky enough, and a lot of the times you don't really get it, is that moment of impact. Quite often in some of the parks, it happens behind a bush, and by the time you get there, the animal has been taken down. But there are some areas like, the Serengeti, the Masai Mara, and probably even the Pantanal in Brazil, where you can set yourself up in such a way that you can sort of capture that moment of impact. I've got one scenario here. So, although it's quite a gruesome thing, right? This particular image is still fairly clean. It shows that moment of impact, but there's no blood anywhere or guts all over the place. It's a moment of impact, and it tells the story. So here you can see, you as the viewer of the photograph, you don't know if this hartebeest got away or not, right? From a settings point of view, what's it, 200th of a second, so it's quite low. It was late in the evening, and you can see there is a bit of movement in the legs. But I was lucky enough, resting on a beanbag, that I got away with in this particular case. Another case here, also just the moment of impact. Again, probably 5 or 10 minutes after this, it starts becoming a bit of a messy scene. And then I often sort of encourage people to then rather, put down your camera and just watch, or, look the other way if you're not really interested in blood and gore. It's a thing that, I'm a firm believer that we capture what nature gives us, but you don't need to present the blood and gore, if that makes sense. Okay, another scenario once again in the Serengeti. Like I mentioned, a great place to photograph these action scenes. Also the Masai Mara, because it's so open. This is during the calving season, so around about February, March. There's a lot of baby wildebeest around, and unfortunately some of them do get separated from the herd. So from a settings point of view, you can see ISO 8000. Unfortunately, a lot of these action scenes do happen late afternoon or early morning when the predators are most active. So you got to push your ISO to whatever you need to. And I think that's where it really helps to make sure that you know what your camera is capable of from an ISO point of view. Again, shutter speed, not as fast as I would have liked, and you can see a bit of movement here. but at least the face here on the baby wildebeest is still relatively sharp. Let's see, there's another moment over here. Again, cheetahs on a kill. The takedown, these are two boys in the Masai Mara that were known for taking down wildebeest. Again, it's still in inverted commas, it's still a clean scene. You can see the takedown. So these for me are the images that really stand out. Then kind of after the takedown has happened, like I mentioned, it goes through a bit of a dead scene, so excuse the pun, but you could have one or two scenarios. So for me, if you're photographing leopard, there's a potential that this animal might take it up a tree, especially in areas where you have a lot of predators like the Sabi Sands. So that's something to be mindful of. Again, with a scene like this, you want a fast shutter speed to try and freeze that movement of the animal being carried up a tree. Another thing that you can do on the opposite side of things is to maybe, if this was captured at fast shutter speed, you can see it's starting to get a bit on the gory side as the stomach is getting opened up. So by using a slow shutter speed, you're almost eliminating some of this gore that's in there, if that makes sense. Let's have a look from a shutter speed point of view. Down to 1/8 of a second, and I had to push my ISO, bring my ISO down to 100, and then bring my aperture up to f40. And the reason for that is to try and get my exposure right to get this slow shutter speed. Remember, if I left my aperture down to like f4 or something, this would be totally overexposed. Okay, so it's all about balancing your exposure at the end of the day to get your like the shutter speed that you're after. Let's see if I've got another. I don't have another one of the. Oh, here's one. Another way is to kind of show that strength and power. So just have a look at the size of this caiman's head compared to the jaguar. So for me, these scenes still click away, still photograph. There's a story to be told here, and it's not gonna, it's not going to stop people from having their lunch, if that makes sense. Then I think also moments that we really, really, really enjoy is once you start getting interaction, between species. So here's a scene that, it was getting a bit gory, but because you've got the interaction of a leopard and a hyena, something that you don't often see, this story becomes, for me, super, super interesting. And in this particular case, your action is not really happening at a very fast speed unless, they start fighting with one another. So you can have a shutter speed of around about 1,000, depending on the light, obviously, that's available to you. Let's see another scene where you've got interaction. Love it when you've got different species interacting. So this was not the same scene as the previous one. This was a leftover impala kill, and you can see that facial expression of this leopard, clearly not happy, had most of its kill stolen away. So this is, as far as kill photographs go, this is where a lot of the magic also happens, when you've got interaction either between the same species or different species. Again, now you're getting towards the end of the kill. There's a lot of this is kind of like leftover dead meat. There's not much kind of blood and gore to it, but you've got different species in the same frame, and when you have different species in that frame, it always makes for interesting viewing and photography. So let's see from a settings point of view. So shutter speed was nice and fast, just in case this male gets up and starts fighting with the hyena or starts chasing them. You've got a shutter speed that's fast enough to capture that moment. So always encourage people, don't just photograph the scene that's in front of you. Try and think what might possibly happen. This lion might look the other way and the hyena steals the kill. Lion runs after it. So you're always going to try and sort of wait for the scene or predict the scene that's going to happen before it actually happens. I think that's the goal when it comes to wildlife photography. Let's see what other. So here's another one. Again, also shooting wide. because of this moment that happened. So this male was feeding all by himself. This pride was moving in. Obviously, they heard or smelt the kill. And, when they come in, especially with these young lions around, there's a very good chance this male is going to lose it and start charging and maybe give one of the young males a bit of a slap or two around. So by zooming out as far as you can, including the entire scene, whereas if you had to kind of zoom in close just on one particular animal, it doesn't really tell the story. So always be, around a kill, and you'll hear the sort of the growling and stuff that happens. So in this particular case, it's not about the kill at all. And in fact, you don't even see a lot of the sort of the goriness to it. The story happens more around here about the interaction between this male and the rest of the pride. So it's kind of showing that there's a kill there without really showing, if that makes sense. And then you've got some moments, towards the end where, especially the cubs, they'll often be playing with a little bone, might be with a kind of the head of the leftover carcass, but this often becomes a lot of fun. It becomes like a little game especially if you have cubs around. So these are moments I always enjoy capturing. It tells the story. They've eaten, but it doesn't really show the goriness to it. There's more of a bit of a cuteness and fun with enough of a story that tells you what actually happened prior to this. And then, sometimes they might be carrying a bit of the leftovers, either to a shady spot or, like I mentioned, just as a game for them. I think that is pretty much all of the ones that I went through. Here's another one of a sort of the aftermath. So we often talk about kind of the lipstick moments. After cheetahs have been feeding, you'll see they've got a lot of like the red around the lips. And you can see in this particular case around the neck as well. So you're photographing tight on the cheetah. You can see the bit of the kill is at the bottom, not revealing the kill and the goriness thereof, but more sort of telling a story of what happened without, exposing your viewer to, a lot of the goriness and unnecessary blood that's involved with the kill. But I think in this particular case, you can see that there's clearly this cheetah has been feeding. You can see the blood on the neck there, and then with its brother just behind him. Food for thought. I think photographing or seeing animals in the wild doing what they naturally do is a great privilege, and sometimes part of that is taking down an animal and making a kill. But I think hopefully with you having seen some of these photos in here, it will give you a better idea to choose the moments to photograph. So just to break it down again, there's a few moments, the kind of the build-up, where the animal's looking towards their prey, the chase, which is I think where the magic happens, the takedown, if you're lucky enough to get to the moment of impact, and then sort of afterwards, the kind of the leftover story. I think if you can get a bit of blood on the animal, without revealing the carcass, or like I mentioned, if there's cubs around, look for interaction between the cubs, some playfulness, or interaction between different species is also can also bring fantastic photographic opportunities. A couple of things from a photographic point of view to keep in mind. So when you're photographing a kill, make sure you've got a fast shutter speed to freeze that moment, get yourself ready, and also remember not to zoom in too tight. All right, rather zoom out, capture that whole moment, and then you can always crop in, especially with the cameras nowadays and the amount of megapixels that you have available. So that's it from me. It's a difficult one, photographing kills. It plays with our emotions quite a bit, but like I mentioned, I think we're out there to showcase what nature does, whether we're there or not, and photographing kills is part of it, but we can do that without including any of the blood and gore. If you have any questions, please give me a shout. We didn't do a lot of editing in these photos because I think a lot of them, once you've kind of frozen that moment and captured the moment, from an editing point of view, it's just the kind of basic panels which have been covered in a lot of the previous episodes. So if you want to kind of sort of see how we would go about processing any of these images, then please give me a shout either on Instagram or send me an email and I'll gladly assist. Or if you have any photos that you've captured in the past of an animal on the kill, please feel free to send it through and I'll create a video on how I would edit that particular image. That's it from me for this episode. Thank you for watching and we'll catch you next time. Cheers.